She was here earlier, but she left a while ago.
Where did she go?
Honestly, I don't know. And if she wanted you to know, she probably would have told you herself. What are you... Hey.
Why the f*** did you have to do that? Why, man?
Now, trying to catch Tariq St Patrick in the world of power certainly isn't an easy task. Many have tried and failed, from Coupe Sachs, Blanca Rodriguez, Kamaal Tate, Jenny Sullivan. All of these guys have failed to put Tariq St Patrick in an orange jumpsuit and keep him there with his entire drug network. They did briefly have him there in season 2, but through his connections, people with influence, and also those who stayed loyal to him, we saw how he was able to overcome that particular situation. However, will he be able to stay ahead and beat Detective Don Carter, especially when he uncovers the body of Salim Freeman, because it really was a messy murder. He came here without the intention of killing Salim, and in a scuffle, he left one hell of a mess. And that's the topic of today's breakdown. A few threats that could actually come back and haunt Tariq, from Salim Freeman, Brayden's girlfriend Elle, and we're also going to touch on a few more in regards to who Tariq needs to keep his head on a swivel for in all things Power Book 2 Ghost Season 4, Part 2. During the course of Book 2 Ghost, Tariq has had a lot of blood on his hands, whether it's murders committed by Tariq or murders that are actually just simply connected to him. He's always been in the spotlight, and as a St. Patrick, he always will be. In Season 1, there was Jabari, who was writing a novel about the murders on Stansfield's campus, with the focus being on Tariq St. Patrick and 2 campus drug dealers who were of course Brayden and Tariq. Towards the end of Season 2, he killed a few of Mecca's henchmen. In Season 3, there was Sebastian Stern and the Russian Connect. However, Season 4 is where the gloves have really come off. 6 were taken out by both him and Brayden in 401, along with Junior Valdez, and then there was of course Salim in 404. But just before we get to Salim, the Junior kill is one which has set off a chain reaction in regards to Detective Carter being on the hunt. After the death of his wife Denise, the task force and cleaning up the streets have been keeping him busy, and hearing Tariq St. Patrick's name was like music to his ears. But we are going to come back around to Detective Carter's potential influence and role in regards to Salim in Part 2 in just a moment. Now, Salim had been out the picture ever since Diana broke things off with him towards the end of Season 3. After she said she wanted nothing to do with him, as well as exposing him for being a fraud, their relationship turned sour. But in Season 4, Diana found herself on the run. After being on the run all night with Drew, she then went to seek a safe place from the only person she could think of, Salim. However, just in hindsight, when you actually think about it, had Diana not gone to Salim's and got him involved, he probably wouldn't have found himself here, which is probably why she felt so guilty and also why she lit a candle for him in 405. When he wasn't hitting back, deep down, she knew what had happened. Now, something else to bear in mind, which could play a key part later on in Part 2, is Salim giving Diana the keys to his car and the keys to his parents in Greenwich. We're going to come back around to that point in just a moment. Now, Tariq knew the one place Diana could go based on her past relationships was Salim's, and he was in no mood for his antics. He got straight down to business and made Salim squeal like the bitch that he is. But this is where he also made a mistake. Very similar to how Ghost used to taunt his enemies, just like he did with Dre in his office back in Power, Tariq did the same. Except, Salim fought back, and even though I enjoyed Tariq using his hands a bit more, being a bit more aggressive, being a bit more physical with his approach, which is something we've all been asking for. You know, I did say before, they missed a huge trick with his time in jail, where they could have used that opportunity to really build his strength by being roughed up by inmates, it may be even creating an alliance, who takes him into the gym and puts him on the boxing bag. These small key details that we saw in Raising Kanan with Ronnie and Unique in the gym, that's what I think they missed with Tariq. I'm not saying he had to become a really well-rounded fighter, because we know he's not from the streets like Kane is, but just him in the gym with maybe Brayden while they're having one of their conversations, instead of being in their dorm room, to show that Tariq is putting in that work, I think that would have made a huge difference. So, even though he was more physical and aggressive with his approach, this altercation with Salim still highlighted a major flaw and a weakness in his game. He's only just managed to get the better of Salim. It was a real scuffle, and had Tariq not had the gun in his hand, and had he not pulled the trigger, who knows which way it would have gone. Now, it also highlights just how much of a messy kill and a situation this really was. Tariq went in there with the intention of just scaring Salim into giving up Diana's location. He definitely didn't mean to harm or kill Salim, who, let's not forget, is a civilian. But it was a very messy kill, and I think he knew it. The moment he pulled the trigger, he definitely thought, what have I done? Way too much blood is being spilled at the hands of Tariq in Season 4. We went through the brief history of Tariq's murders earlier on, But this one in particular still needs to come back around in part 2, especially because Salim's body still hasn't been found or reported. Let's also not forget, Salim also comes from a very wealthy family. Diana made reference to it at the end of season 3. We saw 2 of his huge houses in New York, where it was said that his parents were on vacation. So, you would have to assume that at some point, they're gonna come back, and when they do, they're gonna realize their house was broken into, and then they're gonna find their son, if law enforcement don't find him beforehand. But either way, that's where it's gonna start to get a little complicated for Tariq and the Tejadas, because as I mentioned before, Salim was a civilian, and we all heard what Carter said, loud and clear.
So I got some simple rules. Listen carefully. Civilians should never be hurt in the process. You can kill all the criminals you want, but you spill one drop of innocent blood, and we kill you.
Civilians are not to be harmed. Spill as much blood as you want in the streets, as long as it's not civilian blood. So, when Carter finds Salim, or finds out about his death and links it to Tariq or the Tejadas, because no doubt he will, there's gonna be big trouble. The last thing Tariq wants is to be wrapped around Carter's finger, just like Monet and Drew, because he's got enough issues to deal with as it is. But with the blood that he's spilling, you can't just help but think one of these bodies will catch up to him come the end of season 4, even if it doesn't put him in jail. So just as I mentioned, could it end up with him being wrapped around Carter's finger, just like Monet and Drew are? Is that what forces him to work with the Tejadas again, along with the death of Diana or the loss of their baby? Carter's gonna be a real menace in part 2. Throughout episodes 1 to 5, they've just been laying the foundation and groundwork to show us who he really is and what his true intentions are, and I do think Salim's death could be one way in which he really begins to turn the screw with Tariq St Patrick. Now here's where I also want to look at a different perspective involving Drew and Diana. Salim told Diana that she could stay at his parents' house in Greenwich since they were on vacation. He also gave her the keys to his car, where she then drove herself to Salim's parents. So, when Salim's body is found, not if, when his body is found, you would have to think that Carter and his task force or whoever else investigates this, such as Kamaal Tate, will put 2 and 2 together about Diana being at both locations just less than 24 hours before Salim was killed. So, could we be in for a situation where Tariq may have pulled the trigger, which Diana knows by the way? She questioned him when they were at their first baby scan, where she could tell Tariq was lying. But could it end up with a situation where Diana ends up taking the blame, or maybe even Drew, which is why we see Carter's task force raiding the Tejada house, and also why Drew finds himself locked up. It definitely is possible. And so what are the consequences if a scenario like this does play out in part 2, which does quite sound logical based on what we've seen in the past, Salim's body needing to turn up, and what's to come with Drew in jail. This will only increase the control Carter has over the Tejadas or Tariq even more, which is where Carter may even use them to do some of his dirty work. Carter wants to clean up these streets from these low-level drug dealers as much as possible. But for Carter, he wants these mid-level bosses to remain in charge and turning enough money over so he can get his 35%. And also because he believes by keeping them in check, they can also keep the violence down. But what if he wants a certain drug dealer or a certain someone to be taken care of, where he wants to keep his hands clean? With Salim's death, and with what he already has on the Tejadas, he'd really have them on a string, where they're gonna have to do what he says. If he says jump, he's gonna expect them to say how high. So, I for one, wouldn't be surprised if Salim's death leads Carter to using the Tejadas and Tariq to do his dirty work, such as taking out certain drug dealers, or even Kamaal Tate.
My shared history with the St. Patrick's gives me an edge.
Or maybe that's the exact reason you can't get them to fold.
Or maybe you're not really looking for them to fold at all.
The fuck are you implying?
Your fucking brother gets you this job.
So that's what your fucking problem.
We all know Kamaal Tate is one of the good cops. He's straight by the book, is able to conduct thorough investigations and connect the dots that not many others can or don't want to. It doesn't matter how he got his position, he is a very good detective. But that's also why he is a threat to Carter's organization, and it's only going to get worse in part 2. Kamaal Tate will start digging deep in regards to why Carter keeps keeping him at arm's length, and when he does, he isn't going to like what he uncovers. So, let's see how dirty Carter really is, and whether he could actually use either the Tejadas or Tariq to take out someone who's a threat to his own organization, which in turn would definitely bring a different kind of Rashad Tate back to power. So that's definitely just a thought. If we're thinking about what does Tariq need at this moment in time, what does he lack apart from being physical? It's alliances, and having someone like Rashad Tate in his corner, a man of his influence, who would definitely be different and spared on by the death of his brother, it really would spice things up in part 2.
Are you fucking losing your mind, bro? This shit really got you bugging out. As soon as y'all break up, she's gonna run her fucking mouth.
You think I'm a snitch?
I think you're an addict and I can't fucking trust you, honestly.
Now, one of the big issues that Tommy and Ghost had back in Power was Ghost seeing Angela and Tommy seeing Holly. In Book 2 Ghost, we've got something very similar, with Brayden telling Tariq to keep his eyes off Anya, and Tariq saying the same with Elle, and both have good reasons for doing so. In regards to Elle, we also have Brayden pillow talked about their drug operation, and Elle knowing about their business is definitely dangerous. They've definitely laid the foundation of something big to happen in part 2, with her knowing what she knows, and also her having sickle cell. She relies on a specific type of medication, and you do have to wonder, what happens if she can't get to her medication? What if her medication was swapped out with something else, like Drew almost did with Monet in episode 2? We also have Ghost try to get rid of Holly time and time again, knowing that she was a distraction to Tommy from the bigger picture. We've then seen Tariq doing something very similar with Riley before in season 1, where he told Brayden she pushed up on him. So I do wonder, what lengths is Tariq willing to go to protect himself, his operation, and his future when it comes to Elle? Or, what lengths is Brayden willing to go to if she spills the beans about their operation? Again, just taking it back to Power, we all saw the death of Holly and how it really messed Tommy up, to the point where he felt he had nothing more to live for, especially when he found out she was pregnant. And I do feel that's the next step for Brayden's character to turn that much more, him losing a loved one due to the consequences of this game, either being caught in a crossfire by Tariq making a really dark move behind his back, or by his own hands. So, Elle is definitely just one to watch. At some point in part 2, her storyline will be at tipping point. Now elsewhere, there are a few other threats Tariq does need to be wary of. We all know Kane and Noma weren't happy about Brayden and Tariq's little underground operation, and that will need to be addressed early in part 2, although I do think they will come to a mutual understanding or an agreement with the help of MacLean. But I do think it is going to have to take more for Tariq and Brayden to get back in Noma's good books, and that's where I think Zion will come in. We all know Zion won't take too kindly to the defeat he suffered at the hands of Kane, on his own turf, in front of his own people. His ego and pride will definitely be bruised. So, in part 2, I think he's going to be exactly what MacLean warned of, wild and unpredictable. We've got what looks like Zion choking Tariq on the floor, but where I also think Tariq will get the upper hand eventually. How he manages to do so considering he's going up against a real street fighter. I feel like he'll need the help of Brayden and maybe even Kane, who did beat him once before. So these are a couple of threats I do think will merge. However, having said that, the threat of Kane and Noma will still be there, when and if Zion is taken off the chessboard, and Tariq does need to keep that in mind. Now there is also the potential 2-bit return. Will he let this go unanswered? You'd think he wouldn't, but I also wouldn't be surprised if we didn't see 2-bit either. I mean, it really would be typical of Power. I am sure we will, but we know what they've done before. So let's see if they close off this storyline, or whether it's one which is just left wide open. Now the last and final threat I do want to discuss in this particular breakdown is MacLean. So far throughout season 4, Davis has stayed loyal. However, there will come a time where he has to pick a side, because just as I mentioned, Noma will want Tariq's head at some point, and for Tariq, if he wants the throne, he has to cut off the head of the snake. So at some point, Davis is going to have to pick a side, and that's when the story will start to get messy for his character. I personally want Davis to survive, because I think Method Man has absolutely bodied the role of MacLean, and he is up there as one of my favourites in Book 2 Ghost. But that doesn't make a difference. We all know what happens to characters who play between two worlds, so it is another factor for Tariq just to keep in mind. And with that being said, let me know what you think Tariq's biggest threat is that could come back and haunt him in part 2. Drop all your thoughts and predictions down below in the comment section, and as always, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.